online courses are often almost better than in-person courses for a number of people. First of all, there are a lot of people who are just too shy to sit in a wine course, a physical wine course. And then there are a lot of folks who are too busy. Either they're traveling for work or they've got young kids and getting a babysitter and finding parking is just a hassle. Or they're living in remote areas where physical wine courses aren't offered. And so what I love about the online courses is it's convenient for all of those people because you can log in from anywhere, and they get to meet each other. And we form kind of a little wine club through the classes. And that connection, I think, is what people are looking for as well, when you can't necessarily get it easily where you live, or, through the structure of a 3-hour course at night after a long day of work.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my 3rd book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 43. In today's episode, I'm chatting with Ian Osborn on his excellent podcast called Friends of the Vine, which originally aired on July 15th. Ian interviews master sommeliers, masters of wine, winemakers, and wine writers. Ding, ding, ding. So this is a bit of a turnaround from my usual format because Ian is interviewing me. I wanted to share this one with you because we dig into lots of great wine tips, from how to talk with the sommelier to becoming the expert on your own taste. I also share some behind-the-scenes stories about how I got into wine and what it was like writing my first book. I'll put links to Ian's podcast, website, and social media handles in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/43. Before we dive in, I'd like to share a spotlight on a member of our podcast community with you. Dale Ellis from Albuquerque, New Mexico, wrote in to say, quote, "Hi, Natalie. Loved your podcast with Aileen McCoy." He's referring to episode 39 with Bloomberg wine columnist Aileen McCoy and our chat about scoring wines and other topics. Go back and have a listen if you missed it. Dale, I'm glad you enjoyed that episode, and I'm sending you a copy of my Ultimate Food and Wine Pairing Guide. I'm sure that you'll find it a handy reference when you're deciding on which wine to drink with your meal. If you'd also like a free copy of my Ultimate Food and Wine Pairing Guide, just email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and let me know what you like about the podcast and what I can do to improve it for you. Okay, on with the show.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Friends of the Vine Wine Podcast.
So, episode 32 will feature Natalie McLean. Natalie is a wine writer. She's an author. She has 2 books out. She's working on a 3rd one right now. And she runs, I would say, Canada's largest wine review website. It's got a ton of great content, lots of various wines that she reviews, and she has a team of people that review. She also has created some online wine courses, and she actually began her own wine podcast recently called Unreserved Wine Talk. You may have also seen her on CTV. She's featured there quite a bit. She's one of their go-to people. And before we actually get into this episode, I actually wanted to thank some people for their feedback on my most recent episodes. I've had a couple episodes recently with Esther Mobley and with Sam Muty. The episode with Sam I felt was a bit crunchy on the Skype, and a bit of the wind and a bit of the crunchiness that came through, and I was asking for some feedback from people and got some great great feedback from a few folks. One of them specifically was John Bjork. He is the co-owner for Marcus Wine Company down in Lodi, and he's quite a presence down in the Lodi, California wine scene. And I wanted to thank him personally for that. I'd love to head down there actually and be able to podcast with a few of those folks down in Lodi down that way. Actually, the other area I'm thinking about as well, making a trip, is I would love to go out to the New York wine regions and Virginia as well. Got a lot of listeners out in Virginia. Appreciate you guys, and would love to go out your way and chat with some of the winemakers that you guys have out there. Especially after going up to the Okanagan and visiting and recording with Kelsey from Echo Bay Vineyard. That was so much fun, being able to be out walking around the property, be out in the vines, and go do some tastings and stuff and barrel sampling. So yeah, that was lots of fun. I'd love to do that again. Anyway, let's get started with this episode with Natalie. We actually start with a conversation about how she actually got into wine in the first place. Let's get right into it. You've been into wine for quite a while, obviously. So, I mean, you started your passion when you were quite young, I would say.
Well, I grew up on the East Coast in Nova Scotia, so it was beer and whiskey on the table, actually. Didn't get to wine until a little later in life. I was in my late 20s before I actually started drinking wine, if you don't count Baby Duck behind the high school portable, of course.
Yeah, that's everybody's first experience is a bad Baby Duck, eh?
Exactly, and that screeching sugar headache that you get the next day.
Yeah, that's such a Canadiana reference.
It is, isn't it?
So you kind of started getting into wine when you were a little bit older, shall we say?
I didn't really get started until I was graduated from the MBA at the University of Western Ontario, because I finally had some money, and my then husband and I would start to go out for dinner. We had moved to Toronto. He was working on Bay Street, and I was working at Procter & Gamble. And we would go out, and he started ordering wine. I remember even the first night I had my first really good glass of wine. And we were at an Italian restaurant. We were having a wonderful pasta dish. And the waiter said, "Would you like some Brunello with that?" And I thought it was a sauce or something for the pasta. And he brought over 2 tumbler glasses, really casual, poured the wine, and, put it down the table, said, "Ciao." So we tried this wine. I just remember raising it up, and the smell, I didn't know how to describe it back then. I had no words, but I thought, wow, this is something different from the Baby Duck. And I just lost myself in it. I mean, I really, the aromas and then of course the taste and then the buzz, it was all, lighting up all of my senses. Yeah. And I think that's when I first decided I need to know how to describe this, because I want this experience again. It's not just a matter of remembering this wine, but understanding why I love it.
Well, and to have Brunello as one of your first wines, that's pretty great as well.
Yeah, I had no idea that it wasn't just a sauce. It was a really great wine, and he served it casually, so that was a great introduction, because there was none of the pretense of swirling and smelling corks in a fancy glass. It was literally in a little glass tumbler, but it had all the magic that, great wine can deliver.
That's cool. I'm just curious, because you kind of went from that. You went from that initial, entry into wine to getting to where you are now, where you've written different books. And how did that flow from that point onwards?
Right. Well, I was in high tech, or I transitioned into high tech from product marketing at Procter & Gamble. And I was based in Canada, but the head office was in Mountain View, California. It's now the campus where Google is housed. And so I would go down at least once a quarter to visit my colleagues there and plan. And gradually I started arranging meetings on Thursdays or Fridays so that conveniently I could drive up to Sonoma and Napa on the weekends. Because the thing that I got exposed to down in California, but also just being in the world of business, was increasingly better wines, because you take clients out for dinner. There was no time for golf, thank goodness, because I'm just not a fan. But I got to know wine. And so then, I still had that thirst to know why I love the wines that I did, and conversely why I didn't like other wines. And so going to Napa and Sonoma and talking to people in the tasting rooms was a great way to discover that. And then that eventually led to me starting the sommelier course at George Brown College in Toronto, and I later finished when I moved here to Ottawa at Algonquin College.
Just thinking about Napa and Sonoma, did you go down to Lodi as well?
I didn't branch out from the brand names. Those were the areas I knew that had all the labels I recognized at the time, because my knowledge was very concentrated, shall we say, very minimal. But just going into the tasting rooms, and they were so friendly, the people who would be pouring the wines, and especially if you were there when it wasn't busy, I just quizzed them. And then I realized just how illustrative it is to taste wines side by side. So, in a tasting room, of course, you're getting small samples and, sometimes spitting.
Yeah.
I should be spitting. But it then started to leap out at me, the differences between the wines, because, maybe they poured 3 different Chardonnays. So it's like mini tasting classes. And that really got me going on the road to, okay, I can see now how a systematic approach is going to really up my game and help me understand wine and again, what I like.
It's definitely that systematic approach, and I find that even wines that I know, or wines that have had maybe one, perhaps one vintage of, to try and then perhaps get a few more years in a row, like trying to go somewhere and line up a few different vintages in a row, and then you can see those differences and the different nuances between the years.
Absolutely. And, that's what I do also through my online courses is I tell my students, listen, no wonder you've been intimidated by wine and trying to figure it out when you've probably only ever had one glass at a time in front of you. And I tell them, here's your license to chill. Become a 2 or 3-fisted sampler, taster.
Yeah.
But they like to have fun with it. But as you're saying, Ian, you can either do the vertical tasting, which is what you're talking about, when you have one wine but get different vintages to compare the difference that the vintage made, the weather and so on. Or you can do a horizontal tasting, which of course we both know is not the position that you finish in after drinking. It's a horizontal might be 3 different Chardonnays from, 3 different wineries or regions or whatever. But that's when, it came alive for me, and now for my students who take my online courses, because you're comparing side by side, you start to get that confidence because it's so easy to pick out the differences when you can compare them.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess, how did you go from there to wine writing? How did you go, you know what I mean? How did that kind of come about?
Sure, I had a baby. I tease him, my son, Ryan, that he drove me to drink. And then I say, no, not really. I love you. But I had been working in high tech for about 4 years and, of course, had not taken any vacation. So my maternity leave ended up being about a year. And by then I had finished the sommelier course just for fun at night and decided I need to keep my brain alive while I'm on mat leave. So I started cold calling, pitching editors. And the first one I tried was Loblaws, the grocery store chain across Canada. And at the time, they had a gorgeous food magazine called President's Choice. And I pitched them. The article was Wine on the Internet, because that's what I had been doing in my high-tech job. I was an internet evangelist going from conference to conference. And in fact, at one conference, I was on this panel with founders or management of wine.com, Amazon.com, and some others. And so that marriage between high tech and wine was already intriguing me. How could I bring these things together? And that's what I wrote. That was the subject of my first article for them, and that turned into a column. And that gave me the confidence to cold call and pitch other editors, like at the National Post and other places, so that it became something I was doing full time by the time my mat leave was over, and I decided not to go back because I just loved what I was doing and I could be home with my son.
that's where you kind of have to make that decision or take that plunge, right? And decide, you know what, this is, not only is it a passion, but you saw the potential for the future as well.
I was fortunate. I mean, I worked hard, and I had the skills, because my favorite thing to do when I was in marketing for high tech was write customer success stories. So it's all the research, the writing, that's what I loved, and the storytelling, bringing something alive with storytelling. And all of that really was transferable into wine writing. That said, I had to really hustle and get out there and pitch, because I had no contacts. I had no industry experience. I had the sommelier program that I had completed. It was a diploma program. But as you know, Ian, learning about wine is constant. I mean, you'll never know it all, and and that's probably a good thing, because it keeps you humble, and I think with an attitude of an enthusiastic amateur. I still consider myself that, even though I am a professional who's been writing now for 20 years, had 2 books published with Random House. I still try to take that enthusiastic amateur mindset when I'm teaching my courses or working on the new book that I'm writing right now, anything like that, because I think that keeps you in touch with your readers, and also that first joy, that first thrill that led you to wine originally.
And like you said, there's always something that comes up that will probably surprise you, that you're like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's, or a different take on a subject that you thought you've heard a million times. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like just little things, little tidbits thrill me. I learned just a couple of weeks ago that the vines twirl around the trellis one way in the northern hemisphere and the other way in the southern hemisphere. It's like the way the water goes down the drain in the bathtub. I had no idea. Anyway, I just love little intricacies like that. It makes it fascinating because of this, marriage of all the different disciplines, not just agriculture, but the science and the commerce and the history and the religion and the art. I've always said, wine could be the hub of a liberal arts degree, the organizing principle, because it draws on so many disciplines and is connected to so much of what we do and who we've been in the past.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. My most recent insight is I finally figured out how to spell Kvevery.
Oh, really? There you go. Spell it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, spell quiz test.
Speaking about your books, it is interesting how you like you were saying about storytelling. It is quite a unique way to write the books and definitely have a kind of a storytelling perspective when you write them.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in storytelling. Our brains, we are wired to want to be told stories from the time we're little, and we get bedtime stories read to us, to even now as adults. It's why we love Game of Thrones or anything else that's binge-worthy. We're wired for storytelling. And in fact, I found out this recent study came to my attention, and they've measured the brain waves of a storyteller, the person who's telling the story, and someone who's listening. And at first, their brain waves are very different. But as they get into the story, as the storyteller progresses, slowly the two people, their brain waves get in sync. It's like a connecting factor. It's just fascinating. But I think, beyond that, we remember things, whether it's learning points or whatever, when we can connect them to a story. So that's why, as you said in my books, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, and the second one, Unquenchable, every chapter is a story. But you're still learning things. So, for instance, instead of telling you what good sommelier service should be in a restaurant, I went undercover to work as a sommelier in a 5-diamond restaurant, and I was terrified. And so I tell you what went on that evening, how I was feeling, when I dripped wine on the tablecloth, when I couldn't answer a question and so on. I mean, it wasn't a complete disaster, but I think, as you journey with me through that evening, working in a very stuffy French restaurant, you learn what good sommelier service is. And you're going to remember it much more than if I had given you the 25 things to remember about what good service is and what to ask the sommelier.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I was just thinking about other good wine books as well. You've obviously also interviewed Bianca Bosker.
Yes.
Her style in her book as well, the storytelling style. It just same thing. You just get immersed into what's going on and the situations that she's in her book as well.
Oh, she's fabulous. I just loved interviewing her. And of course, I loved her book. And yes, she was working at restaurants as well. And, it's kind of George Plimpton was a famous writer back in the, 50s or 60s. But he wrote a number of books using this technique. It's not unique by any means to me, to him, to lots of writers do this. Mm-hmm. But he wrote a famous football book while he played football for the team for, a number of months. But, so again, I took that same concept, and instead of telling you what goes into making wine, I worked a harvest with a really terrific and crazy winemaker, Randall Graham of Bonnie Doon in California. And so he's making me carry the spit buckets because it's fun to make the wine writer carry the spit bucket. And I'm hauling hoses, and he's, half a mile down the winery and going, hurry up, come on, you wanted the full experience. We're giving you the full experience. Out there picking grapes and everything else, ruining my manicure. Not that I'm prissy, but anyway. So again, it's a journey, but you still get the info. But I think you retain it when you're being told a story, when you're being entertained. I always say, entertain first, educate second. Because, if you lose people, if you're dull, you'll never get them back. They'll never remember, and they won't keep going with you.
Yeah, and that's the same with your online wine course, because that's keeping people engaged and like you said, keeping them entertained, because there's so much good content out there that keeping them, like you said, keep them engaged is a way to retain them. And I know that a lot of people, they'll stick, like you said, they'll stick with you, and you have those people, they're fans for life, shall we say.
They are. And I don't know if you've heard of the concept, 1,000 True Fans, Ian. I think it's Kevin Kelly in High Tech came up with it. But, for any business, you just need 1,000 diehard fans. I mean, I have more than 270,000 people signed up for my newsletter who get that, every Friday. But really, what we need, for any business or any following or gathering is 1,000 people who will trust us. They know, like, and trust us in a way that they will come to us for the things that we offer, how we make our living. And in my case, it's the online courses and the wine reviews. But yeah, as you going back to your point with the courses, there's so much free information out there. So, someone could say, oh, you know what, I don't need to take a wine course. There's so many free videos, there's, newsletters, whatever. But I think part of what makes a course worthwhile is the journey that you take people on, that you organize it for them, and you take them step by step in terms of what they need to do to appreciate wine, but do it in a fun, engaging, entertaining way. And I think that's what's missing from all the free info. It's not organized. It's kind of a chaos. And do you remember it? Is it trustworthy? Does the person know what they're talking about? And did they take you on a coherent journey where now you feel confident that you know wine, you know what you like, you know how to pair it with food, what to look for in the liquor store to buy wine, how to choose from a restaurant list, all of the facets, the sort of the complete system, if you will, but in a way that keeps you engaged. And that's kind of what I try to deliver with the courses. And I think that's what makes it effective in terms of delivering it online as well. The folks who take my courses don't necessarily want to become sommeliers, although I must say I've had sommeliers take my courses because I do deep dives like wine and cheese pairing and all the different types of cheeses. So I do get people who are knowledgeable about wine taking a specific subject like that with me. But the people generally who take my flagship course, which is Get Wine Smart, aren't out there to work in the industry or to become a sommelier, but they want to be smart about wine and savvy about wine. So you need that sort of journey and that coherency to move through the material. But you don't necessarily want to take the deep dive that some of the professional designations offer. Like maybe you just don't need to know the differences between Hungarian oak and Slovenian oak and, the real deep dive, Brettanomyces and all the different. So, but you can still, be intelligent about it and get enough information so that you're confident, you become the expert on your own taste. Because that's what people tell me time and time again. I know what I like. I've been drinking wine for a while, but I don't know why I like it. And I wish I knew why. And that goes back to my first experience, because if I knew why, I'd know how to experiment with other wines and be confident in choosing different wines instead of defaulting to this same wine that I keep buying over and over again. And I'd know what to avoid, and I'd know better how to pair it with a wider range of food pairings.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's, I think people get stuck in that rut that they look at the wine list and they just look for that one wine that they know, and rather than exploring a little bit, and even just perhaps it's the same grape, but it's from a different different part of the world, or
Exactly. And if you can make those connections, then you can have more and better experiences. Because restaurant lists are tough, because good restaurants often don't have the wines that you're familiar with, because they want to offer you a new taste experience that you likely can't get from the liquor store. And so, then you're really lost. So what do? And that's where, this learning comes into play. Not only making those associations, well, if I like this wine, I probably like that one, but, what do you ask the sommelier to, and not feel intimidated, or, to start a smart conversation with someone who knows a whole lot more about wine than you do, but to hold your own and to feel confident in what you're asking that person.
It's funny. I was just thinking, I went to the Top Drop wine festival in Vancouver a few weeks ago, and before going there, I went and saw my friend Sean Nelson, who works at the Hawksworth restaurant in Vancouver.
Right.
He's a advanced somm, and he kept putting glasses of wine in front of me that I'd never had, just to test me and just to expand my palate. And but he knows what I like, and so he kept well, try this one. Okay, well, now try this one.
That's great. Yeah, Sean's terrific. I interviewed him and Vidge when he was still at Vidge's restaurant in Vancouver,
right,
about pairing wine and spicy food on my podcast. And he's amazing. He's so vibrant and generous with his wine tips. And didn't he win a big award, Sommelier of the Year or something like that for BC?
Yeah, I believe it was 2017 or 2018.
Right.
He won it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. No, he's a great spirit, very good spirit.
Yeah. He's a bit of a doppelganger as well, so we always joke about that. So
That's great. One other point I wanted to make about the courses, Ian, was I get challenged a lot on, wine is such a sensory experience. It's about tasting. How can you teach that online? That, what are you going to do? Text me the wine? And I think online courses are often almost better than in-person courses for a number of people. First of all, there are a lot of people who are just too shy to sit in a wine course, a physical wine course. And then there are a lot of folks who are too busy. Either they're traveling for work, or they've got young kids and getting a babysitter and finding parking is just a hassle. Or they're living in remote areas where physical wine courses aren't offered. And so what I love about the online courses is it's convenient for all of those people, because you can log in from anywhere, and they get to meet each other. And we form kind of a little wine club through the classes. And that connection, I think, is what people are looking for as well, when you can't necessarily get it easily where you live, or, through the structure of a 3-hour course at night after a long day of work. People just find it much more relaxing to be able to sort of log in online. And, they don't have to turn on their video or whatever or participate, but they can, and a lot of them do. And I just love that that interaction. And someone's in Vancouver, someone else is in New York, someone's in Brazil. And it's amazing, that connection that can happen online.
Definitely the global connection and being able to share that experience with people all over the world. And like you said, the intimidation factor where people are at varying levels when it comes, even if it's a standard course or an intro course or whatever, people have different levels. So sometimes it is that intimidation factor for sure. And then just like you said, the ability to do it without having to have a set specific, like you said, I need to get a babysitter, I need to be down there at 6:00, and I need to beat the traffic and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, we record all our sessions, so they're archived, and people can also self-pace and go back and watch these videos again and again, because at least with the way I do it, I offer lifetime access. Whereas, if you take a physical course, you're one and done. I mean, that's it. You don't have access to the teacher anymore. You might have the booklets, but you don't have access to those classes and so on. So I find a lot of people like that too, like self-paced and just layer your learning by playing it over and over again. I know one of my students plays one of my videos every time friends come over, a certain group of friends, and they'll prop me up, I guess, on an iPad or their TV, and then they stop and start the video that's been recorded, and they taste together, and it's kind of like a guided wine tasting in his home with his own friends. Yeah, cool. I love that. I love the way different people use it. There's another woman, and she uses it, the course, for date night with her husband. And of course, if she were taking a physical course, they'd be paying for 2. But this way, they only have to pay for the 1 course. And so it works out a lot for people in those ways as well.
I know that you've been someone who's been on the news when they've wanted someone for Valentine's Day, wine and food pairings, or just Best Buys for, different times of the year and stuff. And just curious about that. Sure.
I've been on CTV's The Social, which is Canada's version of The View. It's now going into its 7th season. I'm very, very proud of the hosts. There are 4 women, and it's Canada's largest daytime television show. And we often take an approach of seasonal topics, like, as you said, wines for Valentine's Day, or how to host a wine tasting party. All kinds. We even pair wine with Halloween treats or whatever. It's a lot of fun, and we keep it very practical but very sort of tips driven. So that's one show I go on. Global Television's Morning Show is another one, and CTV's Your Morning, as well as CTV News here in Ottawa. So my focus now is very much on video, television, rather than all the magazines and newspapers I used to write for. Gradually, one by one, I gave those up because I just couldn't do everything. Mm-hmm. And print is having such a hard time. But video is so powerful. I mean, I think a lot of us watch video but no longer read a long story online. So that's why I've turned my attention there in terms of sharing those clips on social media and so on. And again, that entertainment factor, it has to be there if you're talking about a topic on television. So we're always wrapping some story around it, and some laughter, and some, sprinkle in some insider tips. But that's why I've really started focusing on TV. I just think it's so powerful in terms of a way to communicate.
Speaking about Sean, I think he's kind of been one of Global BC's kind of go-to guys as well the last year or so, especially after winning that Som of the Year in 2018. He's kind of, and like you said, he's got that charisma as well. So he's been their kind of go-to guy out here a little bit.
Absolutely, I'll bet he does a great job with that.
Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking about you've released an audiobook as well for your first novel.
That's right, Red, White, and Drunk All Over, a wine-soaked journey from grape to glass. Lots of fun. It was a marathon for the mouth, let me tell you, because reading 120,000 words, yeah, you need more than wine to keep you going for something like that. But I love doing it. I think, an audiobook, that is the way I consume books, through audiobooks. It's also why I'm a huge podcast fan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just, you can listen to it on the go. And I hear back from the people who have been downloading the audiobook. It's available everywhere, by the way, Amazon, audible.com, iTunes, which is now Apple Books. And I hear back, and I love the stories of how people are listening to it. So, of course, there's a lot of commuters who say, thanks for making my commute seem shorter with the book.
Yeah.
And people who take it, on their headset or earbuds to the beach and that sort of thing. But I love the way an audiobook can be a richer experience, I think, than reading print. You're going to start to think I'm anti-print here, but I'm not. But, with audio, whether it's an audiobook or a podcast like this, you can convey tone, emotion, expression. You can have pauses. And I think, again, it goes back to that childhood love of being read to, having stories read to you. It's almost like spoon feeding you the book. It's very comforting, I think. And I love the experience of recording it and now hearing back from people who are listening to it.
Yeah, my wife actually started getting into audiobooks for her commute, and that was one of the books that she picked. So.
Oh, lovely. Thank her for it.
Yeah, I will, for sure.
Terrific.
I'm just thinking about memorable wines. Have you had anything recently that really impacted you, and something that you've drunk recently that you're like, man, this just stood out?
I think wine for me is all about context as well.
Right.
So
the experiences that you get when you're drinking it.
Exactly. So on the long weekend recently, it was hot as heck, and we were out on this pontoon boat on a lake up north, and the sun was just dancing on the water. And I had an ice bucket of Tavel Rosé from France, Chateau de Caria, and the sun was coming in through the bottle and making a little ruby gems dance on the seat of the boat. And I poured that, and the way I could just feel it go down inch by inch, right down through me. It's cool, chill, and then the aromas came back up, of course, in the finish. And it was just glorious. It was the sun and the water and the warmth, and then the chill contrast of this wine. It was so gorgeous.
Oh, that's amazing. I share a story about one of my first great wines I had, which was from Township 7.
Right.
It's called Black Dog, and it's one of their kind of club member only wines. And you can basically, when you get your club shipment, they basically give you 2 bottles a year. My father-in-law, we had a party, dinner party outside, and kind of al fresco with the lights in the trees, and he brought out one of these Black Dog, which is kind of like a Bordeaux blend, and he brought out the bottle. It was like a 2010, so this was a couple years ago, so it was about 6 years old at the time, and we were like, oh, he's bringing out one of his supply, one of his limited quantities, and I think there was about 7 or 8 of us at the table, so we all got half a glass each or whatever, and then he disappears and he comes back and he brought out his other one from that year. We're like, oh, he's bringing out another Black Dog. It was this whole stock for the year was gone in the one night, but it was just amazing.
That's great. Yeah, he'll remember that for a long time, and the fact that it was a special bottle and that it was the end of the line, that's lovely.
So Natalie, how can we connect with you?
Well, you can find most of the things that I offer at my website, which is nataliemclean.com. You'll find my podcast there. That's just nataliemclean.com/podcast. It's unreserved wine talk. You'll find links to the audiobook there. I send out a regular Friday wine tips to your inbox just in time for the weekend, so you can take advantage of that. And of course, you can join me in my online courses. I teach, of course, the flagship course is Get Wine Smart, and then I do a very deep dive into wine and cheese pairing. That's a different course. So I hope your listeners will join me for one or all of those things.
You also have something called 7 Unusually Great Food and Wine Pairings. That's kind of cool.
That's right. That's actually something, thank you for reminding me, that I created for your listeners. So it's 7 unusually great wine and food pairings. I put together a really great PDF. It's a free download for your listeners. And where they can get it is nataliemclean.com/friends for Friends of the Vine, but just /friends.
Thanks, Natalie. I really appreciate us finally being able to connect like this.
Oh, this is fantastic, Ian. Great to connect with you too. I enjoy your podcast.
I think we're going to leave it there for now. Thanks for listening. For more wine conversation and podcast updates, you can follow us on Instagram at Ian's Wine Truths. Check out our website for great photos of our guests, friendsofthevine.podbean.com. Take care. Have a glass for me.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this chat with Ian Osborn. I recommend that you check out his podcast, Friends of the Vine. He does a great job with it. You'll find links to Ian's podcast, website, and social media handles in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/43. What was your favorite tip or quote from this episode? Share that with me on Twitter or Facebook and tag me at Natalie McLean. On Instagram, I'm at Natalie McLean Wine. If you liked this episode, please tell a friend about it, especially one who's interested in the wine tips that I shared with you and the behind-the-scenes stories. My podcast is easy to find, whether you search Google on its name, Unreserved Wine Talk, or on my name. Finally, if you want to take your ability to pair wine and food to the next level, join me in a free online video class at nataliemclean.com/class. I can't wait to share more wine stories with you next week. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this one. I hope something great is in your glass this week, perhaps a wine that has a special story for you wrapped around it. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.